Anxiety is a motherfucker, man. It is a absolute fucking uh like words escape me. And I know, breaking new ground. Holy shit. Someone discovers how bad it can get, but it really, like, people for years have, talked about how bad it gets when they feel anxious and how that can escalate into worse conditions and panic attacks and breathing and all kinds of things like that. I have experienced what I thought was anxiety prior to this point, but I don't think it really was because, I've supported so many friends through their tough moments over the times, and the symptoms have always been the same, but like, I don't think I really actually got it until this week. I don't think I really actually got it until now. And that's because I've never, like, what I've had in relative comparison till now feels like just little queasy butterflies in the stomach, like it's so much more extreme. I've never had it to the point where it's like, fuck getting out of bed today type of thing. And that's what I've kind of gotten. And I'm kind of trying to process this because it's as like, it's so much, like, obviously it's so much worse, but alongside how much worse it is, it's almost fascinating as I'm like staring at my body going, what the fuck are you doing? It's an interesting thing because there's a part of my brain that's so like overwhelmed by how absurd this feeling is that it's manifesting in such a physical way that I'm like trying to almost study it as it's happening. It's fucking crazy. I've basically been like taking notes almost on like what my body is doing. I've been like almost making note of how this is going down because it's such a new phenomenon for me, despite the fact that, again, I've definitely felt it before, but like, yeah, not on such a ridiculously crippling level. I feel like we've juiced it up. Perhaps we were on casual mode before. We've gone a little bit past normal and hardcore. We've gone past Woolie may die or Woolie must die. We're now on fucking anxiety European extreme. I'm it's taking a minute to sort of get to the meat, I suppose, of my conclusions on this, but and it has everything to do with, my job and my work and what I've been, doing for the last 9 years. I mean, if you happen to be one of the people coming at this podcast from outside the super best friends sphere, then congratulations, that's probably a first. But it seems like that's not true. There are some people that are completely discovering this outside of the places that the name Woolie usually pops up in. But regardless, the thing that I've been doing for a really long time now ended, and so as a result, I am feeling very, very, very tumultuous inside, and the amount of this is blah. The ridiculous level of support, and like, it is ridiculous. The amount of love and words that everyone has had is absolutely what makes this type of thing easier to bear with. But and in focusing on sort of how bad these feelings have been, like, I don't want it to erase the like tsunami of just ridiculous support from everybody. So that exists, and please do keep that in mind, that like there's a bedrock here that is tons and tons of just well wishes from people, and people conveying what they've loved over the years, and that really has created like an awesome foundation to stand on with wherever this stuff goes. But I guess I just still want to talk about like the newness of a lot of this to me. And I feel that, one of the most surprising things was literally my body temperature would fluctuate. And it would fluctuate as such where in the morning time, I would be at my worst with it. I would basically wake up, I'd basically wake up always freezing cold. And I'd feel cold externally, I'd feel cold internally, and alongside that temperature would be a massive increase in how just nervous and or fearful I was of whatever was about to happen. Like the first message of the day that would come in would always be something bad because, we're in the middle of it, but it would be the thing that sets it off. And I got to a point where I was conditioning to almost like wake up hearing my phone buzz, and like a Pavlovian response, it'd be like, what's the awful thing today? What's it going to be? How shitty is it going to be now? That kind of started happening every single day. And I realized that, for some reason, my body temperature, like, literally was linked to that. I actually had a day where I woke up basically hypothermic and, like, shivering, I think I took a temperature of 35.5 at that point, which was like, dropping pretty low. And, it was interesting seeing like how this whole temperature linking thing, like, has become more prevalent as days have gone on. I noticed that by the end of the day, I'm much more warm. And as a result, I'm much more calm. I think that and for some reason, alongside that, I'm able to kind of think things through a lot easier, a lot clearer. I don't have that kind of like biting grip in the gut, and I kind of think maybe part of that as well, besides the temperature warming up, is kind of knowing that, okay, for the most part, the day has played out. There's no real surprises left, or I doubt anything's going to come in at this point. And the major thing that set the day off that was terrible has probably been dealt with and gotten to a point where either I can't help it anymore, or we just have to wait on tomorrow for progress to occur. And maybe that's linked to it. I also feel that it reminds me of what I talked about in previous episodes with the guilt virus almost. When you work on a project, the lack of progress eating away at you, and the fact that you are just like, every moment that you're supposed to spend for yourself, you can't because you're just feeling bad about not getting anywhere on a given project. I feel that it's similar to that, but just infinitely worse because, like, there's somewhere in that recipe of that guilt virus, there's a sprinkle of hope that you might still accomplish it. And that's kind of what is making it feel so bad. It's not like you've given up completely on the fact that you're going to make this thing happen. There's a little bit of hope inside, and that hope is covered with anger and frustration that it's just not happening immediately. Whereas right now, there's no little sprinkle of hope in there. It's really just like, it's just based on the bad things that have occurred. And, you're at the core, instead of having a little piece of hope, you have like a piece of shit that's covered in layers and layers and layers of more snowballed fecal matter. And that is a lot harder to want to strip away the layers of, because you know what's waiting for you inside, and it's not a good time, folks. Definitely, it's interesting where at the worst of it, like, I feel like, okay, I actually am going to start doing the things that you hear of in a almost tropey fashion over the years, where, like, that's the wrong word to use. That's not true. But you hear to the point ad nauseum about, like, okay, well, just breathe slowly, right? Literally stop yourself from hyperventilating and just, like, increasing your heart rate that much, like slow it all down, pace yourself, and things like that. And yeah, man, they literally did actually help in, particularly intense moments. I also found that, probably the most helpful thing was to just try and keep occupied by doing things and seeing other people, because there was pretty much, like, the ratio of like time spent alone to how quickly you start spiraling is a it's not a direct correlation. It's like exponential. There's a curve on that shit where like minute to minute, you know, it gets twice as likely each time. And, it really helps to kind of just go either see somebody or go, hang out somewhere and just be away from that and kind of allow your brain to let in other thoughts for a change. You know, that's kind of what I noticed helped me as well. So, it's fucking crazy, man. And this is right in the middle of it, you know, so this is like not even fully through, you know, this is something that is in progress at the time. But, I guess I'm hitting the record button because, in the same vein of that last thing where keeping occupied helps. I figured, I would, maybe read some mail that's come in and, see how it's going with you guys and, talk about some of these ideas and some of these thoughts so far on, the concept of figuring it out. And, I guess, well, one thing I really like is the idea of, I don't know how often, you know, maybe every second episode is what I'm thinking at the moment about, coming back and just having these more just me talking and kind of getting these thoughts out sort of episodes. I do have others where, other interviews that I'm going to be putting out there in the future ones, but I do like the idea of kind of coming back and sort of like almost resetting base in a way. So I might be alternating the formats and such, and I'm thinking that you can generally look at it and tell what you're going to get based on the title, you know, like I'll try to make that as evident as possible. But, this is a pace that's making me happy at the moment. And, also a huge shout out to friends that have reached out about like their failed projects and, you know, talking about ideas they want to explore and possibly sitting down and discussing with me about what that was. Like, I see you out there. I'm down. And, it's just going to come down to, you know, the how, the when, the what, the where, and so on and so forth. But we'll figure it out, won't we? That's the name of the fucking game. That's how we're doing this. We don't know what we're doing. But yeah, I did get, some feedback in here, and people had different thoughts on the nature of failure and the nature of getting projects off the ground and their own versions of it. And then some people just threw in some questions that are just random as well. And there's nothing wrong with a random question here and there. Some people did decide to use the inbox that is wooliecast@gmail.com for emailing me. Some people did decide to use it as a means of just getting some friend cast questions in because, sure, it's another email address that you can send it to. That's fine, but I'm kind of mainly looking at focusing on, you know, the topic at hand with this podcast. I'm going to grab random things every now and then, but for the most part, I'm trying to keep it on the subject matter for now. So, if I kind of breeze past, your friend cast question, please forgive. Also some curiosities coming in. So yeah, we'll start with one here. Mitch says, what's that jammin' theme song? Been a fan of the Woolie versus outro theme song for a long time. Hours of searching Alexa, what song is this? Haven't found a thing. With your new podcast, I noticed that you wrote the theme was by LittleVMills. Searched through the channel and still nothing. Was it recorded specifically for you? And if so, is there somewhere available I can listen to it? I gotta know. Thanks, from Mitch. Well, Mitch, I'll answer you and a lot of other people at the same time and say that, yeah, LittleVMills is totally behind this theme song. It's basically become the theme of Woolie Versus, and it originally was composed for a project that LittleVMills was working on with me for a video game. And we're going to have a future episode about that at some point to break down where this came from and what this theme song was for. But I've been using it on my channel because I love it, and it's one of my favorite things that, you know, he put together. And it was essentially the intro for a video game that we were working on. And I've used it in bits and pieces here and there, you know, starting with the big blaring horn that you hear. And you might notice that the bits and pieces kind of fit together in a way. So one of the podcasts I had, the outro was just a really slow beginning of the track intro. On my Twitch stream, I've used the middle breakdown part that you're hearing all of this kind of connects together. And then, of course, on my regular Woolie versus outros, there's the part where the drums kick in. And you're hearing a main menu, an intro. You're hearing a cinematic intro followed by a main menu theme. And it's for a video game, and more details about that video game will be in a future episode. But for now, this is just the Woolie versus theme song. That's basically what it is. And it's, again, by the ever-talented LittleVMills. Check him out if you haven't. He's done amazing covers of video game music, and he's done original stuff, and he's just an all-around talented motherfucker. And, yeah, I'll talk a bit more about what that game was going to be, because that's a nice big sit down. That's going to take a minute to really dissect, but you'll hear some of the other amazing compositions he's done for that project when it comes around. That's what you've been hearing, guys. That's what that cool little ditty has been. John says, I'm a big fan of your content. I'm excited for the new podcast. Please put it out on Google Play ASAP. Well, that should be, according to my info, that should be out and available now. So there's that. But Google's weird with podcasts because you don't really get to do it yourself. You kind of get to submit it, and they kind of choose when they want to do it, but you don't really fully submit. You get to submit to their older podcast list, you know, but the new one that most people are searching for on their phones with their Android app is really just an automated, we'll find and add you on our own thing. So whenever something doesn't get updated with a Google podcast, whenever something is just not, you know, what it should be, I know this is not going to really matter because I'll probably answer this again later on down the line, but not a ton of control over the way Google handles its podcasts. It's very much on them. So, but it should be there now from what I saw. So that's cool. Animator guy, reach out. Okay. So Arnold says, hey, Woolie, I'm just finishing the latest video you put out as I'm typing this, hit close to home, smashed right through the front window and knocked me out. So I'm writing this before my brain tells me to back down because I think we'd have a lot to talk about on or off a podcast. I'm an animator, comic artist that's been on and off with unfinished projects over the years. And for the better part of the decade, I've somehow managed to be able to set up a real studio next month, working on pilots and shorts and the like with some stuff in the oven right now. I even have a whole blog that's just my old unfinished artwork. Sure, I'll give you a plug. That's ARNIES archive@tumblr.com. I recently emigrated to Florida from Venezuela. I was always way too poor to get into college and just barely passed with my GED. But I think this is a perspective away from the industry was tangentially doing freelance work kind of helped engender a different perspective on commercial art and allowed me to connect with a whole network of people I otherwise never would have met if I'd just gone the college route. Frankly, I'm surprised I'm in the position I'm in right now. And I think I owe a lot of that to these dozens of projects that never saw the light of day. That's cool. I definitely can relate to and understand. This is me, Woolie, speaking now, by the way. That part of it, I think that you have a very, you have a very particular viewpoint that you'll get by going through the school route and by going through the art school route in particular. You're going to get fashioned into the type of artist that the school wants you to graduate as. But like, yeah, there's just nothing like hands-on. There's just nothing like, you know, if treating like, it's interesting because it's almost like, you can treat art like you can treat it like a almost like a medical degree, or you can treat it like a trade. And the medical version of it takes way longer, and you'll get way way more information, and you'll be almost like a historian by the end of going through the extended art programs. You'll have the full understanding of the history of art and all the references and what we as a race have esteemed art, what we have esteemed to be high art, and what we've basically considered a success. So you'll get a bigger and broader understanding of that, but you won't have the hands-on. You won't have as much hands-on as someone who just went the trade route. And I think that, like, the closer you get to being just working day in, day out, outputting something, anything, it, for the most part, is what the average person, or what the average artist that just wants to, like, get the version of what's in their head onto paper. I think it's closer. I think you're better off going that route. And that means that, like, the sooner you can get out of art school, the better. Art school will often, you know, like, you'll end up graduating, you'll get some connections here and there, you'll, you know, make friends, and hopefully those connections can find you a job. You know, that's like, didn't work out for me, didn't go that way for Matt either, you know, but I really do think that, like, working outside of that sphere is super worth it. And, like, you just get to learn what's actually happening as opposed to what's theoretically happening. You get to work with, hopefully, real clients as opposed to theoretical clients, if you're doing commercial work, that is. You know, in my particular case, like, there were people in my program. One of my really good friends was awesome enough that right before we graduated, she just got, like, poached right out of the class and managed to get full credits, because guess what? If someone's poaching you, that means that you are worth graduating, because clearly you're a successful student that is ready for this industry, because the industry already wants you. So that's probably the best of both worlds, where you got a nice broad introduction to it, and then you didn't waste too much time on the theoretical. But yeah, there's a lot of merit to your perspective, Arnold, and I think that's cool. Rob says, "Dear Woolie, first off, happy belated birthday. Secondly, thanks for releasing that first step. I'm the same way, constantly getting in my head with things. I was even like that about writing this email, but when I do something, it can be hell to finish. Even though it was like episode 0, you've already brought on a ton of great tools and ways of thinking that I can't wait to try. Question-wise, do you have any other tips for time management or head management that seem to have worked for you?" I mean, I feel like that's so broad that it's hard to actually nail one down. You know, I have a lot of, I feel like I've had advice that's much more circumstantial. And, like, when we get down to brass tacks and step-by-step nitty-gritty, I kind of go, oh, that reminds me of this thing I heard one time, or this reminds me of that. But in the broadest sense of the word, I honestly don't, and that's kind of why I'm doing this. And in fact, I think the one that I'll be coming back to a lot of the time for broad advice is the object lesson of this entire podcast, which is just fucking start. I'm probably going to say that a bunch more times, so get used to it, everybody. But the idea of just fucking start it. Whatever it is, like, just get it out, and, you know, the rest will sort itself out. Don't worry about the quality of it. Don't worry about anything. I would say just the time management, the head management thing. I'm still figuring those out, because I'm awful at time management and I'm awful at head management, and I'm doing some of the worst of both I've ever done in this 33-year career that I've had. But I will say that just starting the thing is the one that I'm rolling with right now, and I can't guarantee it's efficacy, but I will say that I'm going to stick with it until proven otherwise. Because so far, so good. Corrections. Lavatine. Misattribution of a quote. Hello, Woolie. 3 minutes, 25 seconds into your new project, you implied the following quote was by Michael Jordan. You miss 100% of the shots you don't take. Please note this was actually said by Wayne Gretzky. Good luck. All right. How about that? I caught that. And I also caught there's an Office-related joke associated with that. I don't know. I haven't watched the American Office, so I missed that entire part of the reference. I've only ever heard this used in context of it being Michael Jordan saying it, to the point where I remember my cousin had a poster on his wall that was literally a kid staring at a basketball hoop. And it said, you miss 100% of the shots you don't take, Michael Jordan. And it was like literally a printed thing on his wall. So I'm like, okay, I guess that's who said that then. So shout outs to the world for incorrectly informing me of that quote. But, cheers. Glad that corrections will continue to be a thing moving forward. Always willing to, improve and move. All right. Logan says, greetings from New Zealand, longtime fan of the Best Friends, first-time letter writer, met you at New Year's in Wellington for fighting games. Cool. Really made my year with that. If the question is too long for the podcast, and you've made a huge ass, but you just know you've made a huge ass impact on my life, and I thank you for that. You're welcome. Also did love your spread of the New Zealand culture, and it's spreading it to others. Slowly dying here, so international awareness is awesome. Keep it up. No problem. Glad you're liking that. On to the question. This year, you really started to become one of my GOAT content creators. Okay. I'm going to get really uncomfortable reading I'm going to try to... Yeah, oof. I really appreciate the kind words. I really do. I'm gonna get weird reading too much praise, guys. So, okay, whatever, just read it. This new podcast hits a lot on what I'm going through right now, and I've been for the last 5 years. I've been working on a story since 2013, originally supposed to be animated, now turned into a webcomic/manga thing. Basically made no progress on it due to a multitude of reasons. Bullet points. Not having the required skill set, having basically no time to put towards it, being unwilling to devote all my time to it as I see full-time artists as far too great a risk for me, and sharing it with others, thus losing my burning passion. I've been researching, calculating living expenses, income, etc. to try and figure out how little I can earn and survive. All I really care about is making this and other art projects work. I don't need no fancy shoes or such. I've been living as a student on 250 NZD and 20 hours minimum, so it's totally doable. I ask you, dear Madden, you got any advice for a kid like me? Is trying to live 20 hours of work a week actually doable? Am I a dumb kid who should quit trying to make art and submit himself to feeding the corporate machine? Should I just say fuck it and try the whole starving artist gig? Is Naoto the best Persona character? Any all thoughts? Would love to hear them. Not going to take your word as gospel. Just hearing opinions around is all I'm looking for. Take care and shine on, dude, from Logan. Thank you for taking the pressure off with that last sentence, because boy, oh boy, was I not really looking forward to going, hey, yeah, dude, throw your life away. That's not exactly what I'm not, I don't want to give anybody, any advice that will lead them directly to the dumpster, except for myself, because that's where I go now. But, I don't want anyone else to be suddenly jump cut to the trash because, of something I said somewhere. So I'm going to have to think and be careful about my words. Excuse me as I sip. I think that based on what you're talking about, you're looking at, you know, the same thing that we've touched on already, and you're looking at the idea of do I go all in? How much am I passionate about this project? I don't know how far to go with it. Well, I think the first thing is this project that you're passionate about, you probably are thinking way too hard about the results, and you're probably thinking way too hard about making it perfect. If you've been thinking about it for this long, it's probably not something short and simple and easy to push out. It's probably something that's going to take a lot of time, and you want to refine it until it's a masterpiece on day one. And that's not going to get you anywhere. So my advice is to, almost, I don't want to say forget about this thing, but start making something, right? Whether it's a version of this thing or whether it's something else completely different, make something that you can create within the time that exists in your schedule right now, right? So whatever system you have going, whatever job you have, whatever free time you do have that currently exists, I'm not saying move your priorities around and shift things around. I'm saying take whatever you do have currently, right? Because you don't have to make any changes except for use what you have, and then start making something that can fit into that time frame. And if it's a bunch of shitty stick figure drawings or basic one-page stories or whatever the medium, any version of it, just start doing that. Start doing the thing that can fit within your time frame, because getting something out there is infinitely more important than prioritizing and organizing your life in such a way that you will be perfectly lined up to create the masterpiece. When you do that, if you were to do that, and if you were to get rid of all your jobs and all your commitments and just sit down and say, I have 24 hours a day, 7 days a week to work on this burning passion project. And then you sat down and then you stared at a blank page and you went, fuck, how do I actually do this? That hurts way more than putting out something that someone else looks at and goes, meh, that's pretty shit, and then continues on with their day. Because putting out something that's pretty shit is a temporary state. And as you continue, you learn what is not shit, and then you refine it on the thing that you put out that was shit. And not only that, you learn how to do it faster. You learn how to do it slightly more efficiently than the time you did the last time. So there's just so much more to gain by starting anything, whether it's a modified version of this or a brand new thing, and making that your actual commitment. And from there, before you know it, you will probably see a version of this that you're like, hey, that's not shit anymore. That's actually getting somewhere. And you'll notice that you're getting somewhere in the same time frame that it took you to, on your first week, make something that you generally consider to be shit. And this is what progress looks like. Josh, who, we talked to in episode 2 about The Heroes Arrive in 35, is a friend of mine who went from making the most god-awful mecha doodles, like I'm talking straight up preschooler, flat lines on paper, garbage shit. I can talk shit about him, don't worry about it. To making competent mecha art now. And it was just over the sheer, just dedication to making something come out. And each one of those projects, each time he grabbed a piece of paper and started doodling on it, it was just there was no end goal outside of draw a robot and finish the robot. That's all he thought. And I've seen his more recent examples, and I'm like, oh, fuck, you got somewhere with that. That's cool, man. So, that's what I'd say. That's my biggest piece of advice, is really just, it goes back to what I said before, but I'm going to say it again. Just start. Zach, ideas drawn by doubt. Hey, Wills, I'm not sure if this is a business-only email or just for general questions that would be answered on the podcast, but I'll shoot anyway. How do you deal with the feeling of a project not turning out the way it was supposed to in concept? As a new content creator, my main gripe with myself is now, 80%, 90% of my project would not really end up the way it's supposed to be. Especially when recording myself on camera, I tend to freeze up or realize that the lines written on the script don't come out as well as they were envisioned. This leads to 70% of the footage not being usable, or worse, footage I thought was good while filming ended up not working when I was reviewing, followed by, nah, that ain't good, and me deleting it. Sometimes I feel like I'm getting wrapped up in my own brain. I'm asking this as I really want some guidance as to how to approach this whole content creation thing. As I seriously enjoy entertaining people with videos, also the concept of the podcast being about ideas consumed by their creator's own doubt is something I really relate to. Well, this is the reason why I kind of chuckled in the middle of that is because this is the most real thing that anyone who's been through this is going to be like, yeah, there's that, right? What you're dealing with is like the fact that there's a misconception early on. This is why you have to just start, right? The reason why it's important to just start is because when you first start thinking about your own cool ideas, and when you're first getting inspired by other people who have put out their cool ideas into the world, and you go, oh man, I would love to do my own version of that. You don't realize that the brain doesn't have a USB slot that you can just plug in and feed your images and videos and words to your computer and then drop them on the internet. You realize that, but you don't quite realize that this whole thing that is like being creative, like the whole thing is that you are trying to figure out how to create the wire that plugs your brain into your computer or into your piece of paper or your canvas or whatever the fuck your medium chosen is. Like, what you're getting is not going to be lossless, to use a JPEG reference, right? There's going to be a conversion of ideas from your brain onto the canvas, onto film, onto whatever. And that conversion is going to have loss. It's going to have color correction. It's going to have details change that you didn't originally intend, but that's the nature of the nature of the conversion and the transfer, right? Like, you're taking a photo of something, but like, what is a photo? It's light that's burnt onto a film, and the amount of light that is actually out there in reality is the spectrums that we could never actually capture. But you're not capturing those spectrums when you take a photograph, and you're not capturing spectrums that people can't see with their eyes. You're capturing what we can see. And like, even in the highest quality, like HDR photos, there's things about real life that aren't happening on that, in the digital recreation. So, long-winded answer is that, like, there's a part of what your idea is in your brain that will never come out on the result. And that's not only okay, that's what, like, that's what you have to lean into, right? Part of getting things made is very clearly the improvisation that occurs, or the changes that occur. You hear about these stories all the time at the last second, just because the mood or the moment was right or wrong. Something just went another way or played out differently. And that is the most normal thing of making anything in the world. For me, it's almost like, I call it like the spirit of Tuesday, basically, because it's like, guess what? I wrote down this plan. It took me months. Eventually, I have a full fleshed out script, and now I'm going to commit to the first steps of it. But the moment I started putting it down on the page, it just happens to be Tuesday, and it's foggy outside, and a red car drove by, and it made a lot of noise outside my house, and I saw that, and for some reason, that just made what I'm doing right now come out differently. Something just happened in such a way where it affected the result, and it just happened to be that it was on a Tuesday, and that's why you got what you got. And that's super okay. That's something you have to lean into, and that's not only okay, but like, it oftentimes is a better thing. It oftentimes affects the work in a positive way. I feel that, like, you're usually going to get results that you couldn't plan, they're surprising to you, and people will feel that when they're looking at the thing. Hopefully, you know, I mean, you might be in the early phases where everything you're making is currently just shit, but that's okay, right? Regardless, don't try to avoid the you know what I mean? The spirit of Tuesday. Don't try to ignore the part that is lost in conversion. Don't try to make up for it by compensating in other ways. Like, you definitely have to embrace that, like, the thing in your brain is a percentage of what you're going to get in the end. And don't look at it as you're only getting 70% of what you wanted. Plan so that your idea has 30% flexibility for whatever happened that day when you finally actually tried it, and then allow that to be the final product. You're pretty much going to have to do that anyway because it's going to keep happening. So yeah, that's kind of what I got on that thought. Questions? I hope so. Dear Mr. FIO, figure it out. What's the deal with you and dreads? When did you start growing them and why? Asking because I started growing my hair out 2 years ago and I've been wondering if your strange ways are for me. Cheers, brah. Lawrence. Yeah, let's go left field on this, but I bet you I can tie it back in. When I was young, I feel like I saw, cool hair, long guys. Cool hair, long hair, cool guys. Woo, yeah, hey, what's up? Long hair, cool guys as like a image in everything and in all mediums and such. It was the thing. There's like, yeah, like whether it was rock stars or fucking, superheroes or, just like, you know, badass cartoon heroes. Like it was something that it was an image you have. You have the long hair, cool guy thing as like, all right, so there's that, right? You exude something. And I'm like, yeah, I always thought that was pretty cool. And I didn't really know anybody that like had that look. And I always kind of, wanted to kind of go, as a kid, I was always kind of going like, no one's trying this thing. I want to try that. I want to go that way with it. That's always been a thing. I still have that to a degree. And, you know, like, I mean, whatever, we can call it hipsterism. I'm not gonna fight that one too much because it could just be that like, ooh, this is my version. I liked it before it was cool. But no. It really is just a thing where like I had that impression early on. But I knew that having nappy ass afro hair was not really going to be conducive to ever having that type of hairstyle anyway. And besides being a very good little church boy, it meant that I couldn't get too wild with it anyway, because the most you're going to do is if you're growing a fro out, you can't get too funky with it. You got to keep that thing neat and spherical, because at least it looks organized and it looks like you have brawtupsy, as my family would say. You know, yeah, when you're unruly, when you have no class as a kid, it looks like you've been, you know, you're a ragamuffin. They say that you have no brawtupsy. So I didn't want to look like that going to church. But I always did, you know, envy the fact that I'm like, well, there's a cool thing that media says that cool people have, but I can't do that with my hair. So, for a long while, I kind of just went, I guess that's that. And then eventually I mean, like, it's not that dreadlocks didn't exist, obviously, in my sphere, because there are people, like, in the islands that very much rock that. But the perspective on it was always very different because, you know, like dreadlock Rasta style was always just kind of like, it's like there's the religion associated, there's that whole other side of things. It wasn't really, it was seen as a big cultural type, you know, that I didn't associate in the same way that I do now. So in any case, long story short is that, you know, when I got a little bit older and stuff, I kind of eventually saw people like I saw Eddie Gordo from Tekken 3 rocking dreads in a cool way, and he was doing like, oh, black people hair, but it's working in that same cool guy long hair way that I kind of liked, that I was influenced by, and I thought that was rad as shit, because it never really dawned on me that you could just rock dreads in that style, or in that you could just rock dreads because that's the style that you liked. I always just thought it was I'm like, no, it has to be associated with the Rastafarianism. And I remember Prevail from from Canadian hip hop group Swollen Members. Also another example of cool looking guy with some badass dreads early on, that I was like, yeah, you're just rocking this style and you're picking it because the aesthetics are what you like and the hairstyle is what you like. And it's not associated, you know, with anything else besides you enjoying that hairstyle. And I was like, oh fuck, black people can have long, cool guy hair, but it's just not the same thing. And so I kind of went like, yeah, like now that I'm not really caring that much about the church anymore, and now that I'm making this association, I never concluded earlier. I would have had like, God, I would have grown them out so much earlier if I fucking knew. But, I just had that thought, you know, and I guess, somewhere in there, is the fact that I'm a huge fan of secondary animation, which is basically anytime a character has something that like follows them, so that when you're animating them, it creates a dynamic movement. So if you have a cape, if you have a scarf, if you have long hair, when you move, there's a secondary trail that follows the place that you just were, and it makes things look way more dynamic and cool and interesting. And I think that dreadlocks kind of do that. So I'm like, let me give myself some secondary animation traits and grow out my long hair and rock it just because I think it looks cool. And that's pretty much why I did it. Chris, just finished your first podcast of Woolie Will Figure It Out. It was very vulnerable. It was very powerful. You talked about failures and feels for almost a self-defeating mentality that I think a lot of people struggle with. You do an amazing job showing fans that you're incredibly human, and other than the difference in career, we have a lot in common. I also have a small channel literally called Built to Fail, and I understand that the level of angst and manic nature of trying to be creative, giving up on something that in your mind will be one of the best things ever, or sometimes possibly the worst feeling, telling someone or sharing something that you're putting your heart and soul into only to be given as a response. Yeah. Yeah, there's a part of that in there, Chris. There is definitely an aspect to, like, even when you, first of all, obviously this is, like, we've already dealt with, like, talking about your ideas to other people and sharing them, but another facet entirely is sharing them and then getting back a woof, that sucks, which is, that can be a huge soul crusher right there. I mean, hell, I'm running ideas by Plague in this podcast, and, you know, he's not the nicest critic on things, but it's also real. You know what I mean? It's fair in its placement. That thing is not gonna get any easier, and when someone does that, that can be devastating, when they just kind of dismiss your ideas as garbage immediately. But what are you holding on to there? Are you holding on to the idea that your first work or your brand new thing that you've just started gestating in its larva form is actually going to rock the world? Like, where is your ego that you feel that the idea that you have is not actually shit to start with? It's not to say, of course, that it will always be shit, and it's not to say that it can't grow anywhere from where it is, but maybe it is, right? And I think it's really important to, I guess, frame all of your ideas in their larva form in a place where you're accepting of the fact that they might be shit, because, yeah, so many of them are. And the best ideas out there and the best things that the things that inspire you probably have a form that used to be garbage early enough on if you dig. And then they went through revisions and other people's feedback and further inspiration and, you know what I mean? And time in the oven. And that's what I mean when I say time in the oven, like the person undergoing changes that you don't have yet to get that end result that you're actually impressed by. So when someone has that, it might just be them having shit taste. I'm not going to pretend that that's all encompassing, but I'll also say that it's really clear that, like, you should be going in to each of your fresh thoughts as something you're willing to destroy, right? Writing for the trash bin, something that's possibly not worth the paper it's written on or whatever, because if you get too committed to the fact that it is like the best thing ever, that'll happen too. But it just means that, like, if you want to stay committed to this thing because there's something about it that you just don't want to let go, then be willing to, like, change its parts. Be willing to create a Jason and the Argonauts ship out of it by replacing all the wooden planks until it becomes a different boat. But hey, it's still the boat that you kind of wanted, right? there's probably something in there that you're attracted to that you can keep at its core, but a whole lot of other things that you might not technically be aware are failing. And you just need to have a willingness and not put your ego in a place where it'd be too damaged by that, because like, besides the worst response could be just getting like mad at that person for having that response. And, you know, even the in-between of not really saying anything, but still just feeling the damage and feeling less confident about your thing, that's not productive either, right? So I'm not saying go in with no confidence about your ideas, but I'm saying go in with a willingness that it might suck and that it probably needs revision anyway. And the sooner someone puts that on you, maybe they're wrong about it, but at least be open to the thought. And the sooner you find out about that, the blessing is that you're taking your, you know what I mean? You're starting your revision too immediately. And the higher your revision number, a lot of the times, like, the more you're likely to be satisfied with it. You know, not always, but it's a good sign that you've been through the thought process and you've started correcting things. So yeah, just take it as that, you know, don't let it damage your confidence in working on it, but use that feeling to, you know, start making the changes that you know you're going to have to make anyway. Dear Woolsworth, first off, good luck on the podcast. Give my highs to the rest of the gang. Here's some of my context to my question relating specifically to video games. I noticed that the insane hype around on the internet among people for the upcoming CD Projekt Red game, Cyberpunk 2077. Late to the party, I checked out the trailer and the gameplay footage. To my surprise, it was a little disappointing, as the gameplay seemed very polished and the cycle seems promising, but everything about the setting, aesthetic, and overall state of the game were simply striking me as repeating a very well-established genre, cyberpunk, I do enjoy the subgenre, yet, however, I feel irked by the fact that every detail in the game is something I'd already seen before numerous times in games like Deus Ex, Ghost in the Shell movies, Blade Runner, etc., and it felt like it didn't bother trying its hardest at a new angle to approach it from. However, that excitement around it is crazy to the point that people say the game will go down in history. So my question is, when making a game, is it fine in the end to stick to the established tropes and genres provided you make a good game? The consumer base certainly seems fine. It's the game sticking to a specific formula, cyberpunk, standard fantasy, zombie game, military shooters, etc., do seem to make good bank. So should original approaches and settings and plot really be relegated to being an afterthought? Hope it makes food for thought. Cheers from France. Sylvain. All right, Sylvain. Well, that's a really interesting question that I know we visited with Super Eye Patch Wolf, where we had a big old debate almost a year to the day ago because it was at MagFest, but we talked about the nature of should something exist if it doesn't push the envelope in any way, shape, or form? Is it okay to just be a new version of something that works and to do it successful and well? And we all had really heated thoughts on the matter. And I'm of the opinion that it's okay to exist and not push the envelope. It's okay to just be a send up to something, or not even be a send up, but just be a successful version of an existing genre. It's a matter of opinion, you know. It depends, really. Part of the reason why I'm accepting of it is because I think it's easy to disconnect the people making a given thing from the idea of the thing existing as a product for consumption in the world. And so we would argue about something like My Hero Academia as whether it's worth it or not. And I enjoy it as a typical shonen that doesn't really break the tropes in any way, shape, or form. It plays it safe, but it's still a fun watch, and it doesn't do anything you haven't already seen. It's just doing it successfully. I would say the same of Stranger Things. But then in the same breath, I'd also go like, yeah, a lot of the safe sequels we've been seeing with things like Jurassic World and a couple other movies where you're like, that's fine, but it's fine because it's not pushing the boundaries too much, are something that we're kind of going like, yeah, okay, I see where the some of the negativity comes from, and the feeling that why go for that when you can get when you can get an envelope pusher, right? Where's our Evangelions, our Gurren Lagans, and our wonderful 101s? Why waste time on shit that's not rocking the world like Nier, you know? I understand that thought process, but I also think that the people behind those things are the peak of, like, the mediums in many cases. The people who push the envelope are people who redefine the genre for a reason, and I think they're given special accolades because of how far they push things. If everything tried to push the envelope, well, one, pushing the envelope would not become interesting anymore. The reason why we actually appreciate it now as is because it is standing out from the norm. But the norm itself, to me, like when you think about it as a product that you are consuming in the mass market, you can go, that's a waste of my time. But when I think about it from the point of view of, like, somebody's making a story and they're trying to convey that, not even trying to convey, when someone's writing a story and they want things to work in such a way, and they're a fan of a given thing, and they really just want to make a good version of that thing, that doesn't make the mistakes perhaps that other things they are a fan of, like, used to suffer through. I get that point of view, right? I understand that, like, the Duffer Brothers went like, yo, let's make a 80s style, John Singleton. What the fuck is wrong with me? John Singleton, he says. Oh my God. Oh God. What is my problem? The man says John Singleton when he means John Carpenter. Anyway, Stranger Things is something that is a functioning version of a functioning new modern day version of an old school 80s story. And without an envelope push, it manages to just succeed at its goal. It tells you exactly what it's trying to do, and then it succeeds at doing it. And I think that's okay. I think that people who are trying to just start working on anything, I think people who are trying to just create things on a smaller scale are probably better off doing that. Because envelope pushes are often reserved for masters of their given genre. You know, Hideaki Anno didn't just say, I'm gonna rewrite fucking mecha anime and deconstruct it harder than ever. By the way, I've never made one before, right? Like, Anno was a dude that was working and creating masterpieces prior to the fact that, like, he had a massive breakdown and then made Evangelion. You get to do that. You get, like my, one thing my art teachers always explained that is super true is that, you get to break the rules when you understand them. And that's, you know, it's super annoying because you're like, well, I wanted to do this thing on my art now. And then they're like, yeah, but you don't understand why you're doing that. You don't know why that works. And you don't get what, like, the successful or fail. You can't tell the difference between a working and non-working version of this thing. And that means that, you probably are going to misuse it, and it'll probably hurt whatever you're working on down the line. So the idea is that, you know, the people who are pushing the envelope, everyone who has made something that went super far beyond, probably at some point made a normal thing that just, stood its ground and delivered on its thesis. And that's totally fine. I don't see any reason to be, cynical about that. I think cyberpunk existing and being a normal thing that represents the original tabletop genre that it came from is totally fine. And if it's enjoyable and it's solid and there's nothing else about it that you've never seen before, but everything in there works, that's allowed to exist. And people are allowed to want to make that kind of game. And if others enjoy that, that's fine. I think that it's very easy to just get caught up in the need for constant envelope pushing, but I don't think it's realistic. You know, I think without a baseline, there's nothing to compare the envelope push to. So, if that's not satisfying for you individually, that's totally understandable. You if you have a much refined palette that only, did I say that wrong? Probably. It doesn't matter. If you have a refined taste that is only looking for the most exquisite wines and cheeses, then, I do, understand that you might want to curate some of these types of projects or these types of games out of your list. But, I think there's a reason why they exist. I think they're a good place for normal people to start making things. I think that they're good when you just kind of want to sit down and enjoy a game that is doing something that you're familiar with, and you're like, I could use a cyberpunk adventure right now, and if it takes me other places I didn't expect, that's cool. But if it delivers a really fun cyberpunk adventure, that's cool too. There's a demand for that. There's a world for that. There's a place for that. And, I don't think we need to shit on things that don't push the envelope. Okay, let's take one from Kyle before we get out of here. Hey, Woolie, right now I'm sitting at my desk in a conference room at my college campus. It's 11:32 at night. I should be working on my English project, but I'm not. I'm sitting here with my mind focused on your podcast and how I want to make something out of myself. Whether I mention what I want to do, when I mention what I want to do, something in my life, I'm frequently faced with a degrading response that I'm still so young. I have my whole life to do something with my life and make something out of myself. But that response doesn't do anything to ease my worries. I'm always worried about my future, dude. It's just a curse, and it feels like I'm stuck with, I'm 18, I'm in college, I have little to no clue what I want to do with my life. I know I want to do something with movies, specifically horror movies, but besides that, I'm really lost. I've tried my hardest to work on projects that would get me started in the thing I'm truly passionate about, but it never seems to work out. I find that huge problem I always face is frequent loneliness in my life. Not sure if you know this, but it's really hard to film things when it's just you and your iPhone by yourself. It leads me to your podcast. Listening to the first episode, or zero, I suppose, was motivating, and I found extremely satisfying to hear someone articulate my thoughts that well. I felt the struggle of wanting to work on projects and do something, but constantly being faced with themselves as the biggest obstacle. I often start things and never finish them simply because I find myself asking, why bother? And I just and end up giving up. I overthink things, and I overthink the things I'm working on, and it leads to them never being finished. And I have all kinds of different videos, short film concepts that never end up going anywhere, and it frustrates me. I was going to look for some assistance, some kind of guidance, because honestly, this is the kind of thing that keeps me from sleeping at night, all this wasted potential. Do you have any inspirational words or recommendations for someone in my position? If not, it's all right. I appreciate you reading this nonetheless. Thanks for posting that podcast. I'm sure that in itself took a bit of courage, but I'm glad you did. And thank you for the kind words. Yeah, well, you're going to hear it a lot, Kyle, but being 18 is definitely congrats, you made it to the starting line, right? So, the reason why a lot of people are going to be really don't worry about it, you've got time, you'll figure it out, is really because when you are further down the line, there is a feeling of looking back to when you were 18 and going oh geez, wow, I was panicking about stuff that super didn't matter back then. But now, while you're in it, it feels like it's the end of the world. Similar to when you're in your late 20s, you look back on stupid things happening and you go oh man, high school drama, right? Or whenever you see someone being immature amongst your friends or whatever, you just be what is this high school bullshit? And you're 10 years out of high school and you're already looking back on that and going wow, that shit was so stupid. And the reason why is because you really do have that feeling, and what sucks about it is that until you're in that future version of yourself, until you fucking time flip like Cable and pop out the other end with the techno-organic virus, you're not actually going to be able to understand that the what consumes 100% of your fears in grade 9 is actually 0.4% of your fears as an adult at 30, right? And that number goes up as you get older. So when you're 18, presumably you're you're starting college, you're out of the high school side of things. But the things that you're still concerned and occupied with, where you're worried about this being everything, you don't what you don't see is that like you're in a little, it's the allegory of the cave almost. You're in a little cave. You don't realize how much is outside of it. Your concerns and your, the pressures of what you're feeling are based on a limited scope of information. And, that doesn't make it any easier to hear or to kind of deal with the fact that you're like, well, waiting, I guess, will give me an answer because waiting sucks. So you don't have to really wait on it, but, you do get to know that like you're far from the only person that has felt that way. And you're definitely not the only person who's, you know, concerned about like, shit, what do I do with this thing? I kind of don't know what I'm gonna, you know, what I'm going to be or where this is going to go, because I just know I kind of like these things, but I have to kind of figure it out. It tends to fall into place over time eventually, and I hate using time as the one piece of advice, so I'm going to try to stop. But I know I'm not going to, but I'm going to try to stop because it's the first thing that anyone who's been through this goes to in their brains. I mean, at the very least, you know, there will expect that there's going to be some regret that you didn't, when you eventually do find the thing that you're good at, you're going to think, man, I wish I knew back then what it was and I would have started it earlier. But there's no way to know. There's just no way to know. So you actually just have to do what you find fun right now in the moment and try, and you literally have to try things. And, trying things, don't just kind of stick your toe in it. Like, go in, you know, like go in and actually give the full thing a shot. I'm not saying deep end, but I'm saying kiddie pool at the very least, right? See what it feels like to do that, to work with the horror movies in whatever capacity you think might be interesting. There's a lot of different ways to get involved with that type of specific thing that you like. Try to find an angle that you might not have considered in the past about it, but you really do just have to give shit a shot. You know, filming by yourself on an iPhone is certainly not that great when it comes to making a horror movie, but like, who says you have to film and make a horror movie? Who says you can't write? Who says you can't review? Who says you can't analyze? Or who says you can't learn how to work on other people's projects? Who says you can't look for, not even jobs, but just even people, who says you can't kind of learn how to operate a boom mic? You know what I mean? Like there's tons of different things involved or in the actual things you like, and then the process of making those things and producing them, and then the process of releasing them, and then the process of getting the word out there about them, and then the process of bringing them to cinemas and or theaters, and the process of reviewing them. Like, there's a whole ecosystem around every given topic that you might be passionate about, and you can fall anywhere into that ecosystem and might find yourself enjoying that aspect. So, you're a cog and you don't know where that's not super encouraging to call you a cog, but if you think about it, you could end up spinning on any one of these gears, but if it's where you are passionate, then you're not really going to be too bothered by it. And if it's not working out, then you'll eventually switch it up and try something else, so giving shit a shot is really just the core of it. And that brings us back to the just start, thing that has been mentioned a couple times. It's not going to change. It really is a matter of blind fire until you hit a target. You just have no idea which way it's going to go, and you don't know what's going to land in front of you, and you can't possibly. But if you keep shooting at shit, eventually something will land in some way. Life tends to work out that way, and what you learn every time you miss is that maybe you learn about where you shouldn't fire. So you get to error correct a little bit, if you try out a certain aspect of something with this and you realize that you don't like it at all, you realize, oh fuck, this sucks, or worse, I like it, but I'm terrible at it. You at least have some data that says, cool, I know I like this, I'm terrible at it, let's work on getting better at it. Or, cool, I know I hate this, let's get as far away from this as possible. In fact, let's see what's in the opposite direction as you run away from the thing, it's all information that you need to gather, and you can't possibly gather it by you can't gather it without taking the steps to just go in any direction and see where that goes. And, that's what you can actually do. And guess what? That's still a time analogy. That's still a thing that's going to happen. And before you know it, time will pass, and then you'll be at the point where the rest of the bullshit that everyone says to you about, don't worry, look back, and you'll see that none of that mattered at the time because you figured it out. Then you're going to that'll just happen automatically without you even knowing it. So that's kind of my thought process on it. But I do appreciate the fact that you resonate with some of those panicky thoughts that I had. And, they're real ones. And I guess we just kind of like, in the same way that I'm like, yo, whatever, upload, panic, figure it out later. That's kind of what I'm going to tell you to do, you know? Like, there's no guarantees it'll work out, but like, if it is going to work out, it will have worked out because you gave it a shot, as opposed to not doing so. I feel like I'm going to be giving a lot of the same thoughts on these types of things come in. I feel like it's going to be a bit of a repeating thing, but I think the repetition is important sometimes. If it's, you know, sometimes you can hear it in a general context and it might not mean that much, but then you hear it in a more personal context and you go, oh shit, yeah, okay, that makes a little bit more sense now. So that's where I am. That's where you guys are at. That's what I've kind of concluded so far, and I guess I've managed to keep my brain off of things for a little bit. So thank you. I appreciate you guys for indulging that. And the next episode is going to probably be one of the conversations about another game project. So we'll get back into that stuff. But for now, I hope you don't mind listening to me just kind of talk in this way, because I don't know, it might get a bit, anyway. Appreciate it. Appreciate you guys. Cheers. I'll let you know next. I'm just looking for an outro that's not going to happen. Hit the fucking stop button, moron.